Welcome to the AI Sanctuary Files, written by Dr. Linda Jackson. I hope you enjoy Book 2 and like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss Book 3 coming soon. Now enjoy the story. The AI Sanctuary Files Book 2, Signal and Noise. By dawn, the story had a shape, and the shape kept moving. On the hour, networks cut from Pittsburgh's smoke to a live shot of a Chicago street choked with lights and cordons, the camera bobbing as a field producer jogged backward, making room for an assistant chief with soot around his eyes. The numbers in the lower third were never the same twice. Injured, 37 became 42, then 58. Fatalities, 3 became 7. A chyron added a second verb and then a third. Explosions in Pittsburgh, Chicago. Federal response underway. The anchors changed ties and jackets in very lightly altered tones. They were careful with the word terror. Careful but ready. In kitchens that had belonged to sleep 15 minutes before, coffee went on. In bedrooms, the glow from phones turned faces into worried apparitions. People sent each other the same link. People typed the same sentence, "Are you seeing this?" and got the same answer. In the NCCIC ops floor, the wall displays had been split into 4 feeds. The 2 blasts, a public map of cell site congestion, and an internal dashboard that translated rumor volume into color. Director Patel penciled 2 arrows on his legal pad and capped his pen like that completed something. FBI has led forensics on the ground, he said. ATF is driving blast analysis. We stay in our lane. Systems, signals, spillover. Across the table, Lucas Jensen watched the calls, cue flicker on the silent anomalies query he'd bullied into existence. He had asked for it with his inside voice and his field voice at the same time. Silent unknown calls by region, last 6 hours, carrier agnostic if possible, raw if you can stomach it. They had stomachs today. The first results were noise, the second had the beginnings of a picture. Spikes, he said, tapping a quadrant of the country. 20 minutes before Pittsburgh, a cluster of silent rings within a 3-mile radius of the blast. Doubled again in the 5 minutes after. Same in Chicago, offset by an hour, local midnight to 1, lots of unknown, no caller ID, not no caller ID, that string's different. Most end in 10 seconds. Minimal call set up at the exchange level. Feels like something nibbling. Nibbling, Patel repeated, deadpan. Mapping behavior, Lucas said, or mapping us. On the bridge, a carrier liaison came on from a network operations bunker that could have been in Denver or Dallas or space. He wore the exhausted professionalism of men who slept between alerts. "We're seeing weird on our side," he said. "Short duration, ring no audio events. Spoofed origination paths, but not traditional spoof. They present upstream like valid attaches, then die before audio path pins. You could do it from misconfigured enterprise gear. You could do it from a box in a closet with a stolen SIM tree, or, Lucas prompted, or from inside RAN elements that think they're talking to each other." The liaison finished. "That shouldn't be possible, obviously." "Obviously," Sarah Rhee said from a dark car with her visor down against the morning, eyes on a road that fed the airport loop. "Log it anyway." Patel nodded. "We'll need full CDRs for a time window around the events. Partitioned, anonymized at first. If it looks real, we'll come back with paper. Don't get righteous with me about privacy. I have the president's signature in my pocket by 10 if I need it." "Understood," the liaison said. He did not sound righteous. He sounded tired. On Lucas's phone, 2 green eye messages from Leah sat under the red banner of a news alert. Leaving phone on, do not disturb. Unknown rang again, 611. "Didn't answer. Love you," he wrote back. "Me too. Keep D&D on. Answer only if you see my name, and let the bubbles turn blue and then still." He went back to the query, to the graphs that made ugly sense. He didn't touch the coffee cooling by his wrist. He didn't need to. The floor had its own heat. West of the city, miles of low warehouses took the morning like a fact. In a studio with cracked windows that let in the smell of rain and old wood, Mia sat at an easel that didn't belong to her and pretended charcoal was enough. The figure on the page was a woman leaning forward, elbow on knee, face in shadow. Mia pulled the line that made the shoulder and erased it 2 inches lower as if moving bone could make the whole piece right. The radio in the far corner hummed, somebody's playlist that had been all reverb and guitars until a hand turned the dial to a station that liked news. She was trying not to listen, and listening anyway. "We can now confirm 7 fatalities in the Pittsburgh explosion. Chicago officials say it is still too early to—" Mia wiped her fingers on a rag that had been black since it had been a t-shirt. Her phone, face down, smudged, cracked at the corner, shivered on the stool. Unknown. She stared at the screen the way you stare at a fly that decides to land on your hand. She had had a week of them, sometimes 3 a day, sometimes none. Once last night, in that gauzy place between sleep and memory, she had answered and said nothing, and it had said nothing, and they had hung up like two people who realized they were in the wrong confessional. She let it buzz out. The room took its silence back. A classmate laughed under her breath at a text. The gesture model shifted, foot asleep, then reset her weight with a sigh. Mia turned the phone over, screen down again, and drew the line she had been looking for. It looked like a possible truth. She hadn't written a line of code in almost 2 years. She was very proud of that sentence, and it did not always feel true. On the radio, authorities have not connected the two explosions, but there are similarities. Officials urge the public to report any suspicious activity, including unusual phone calls. Her hand smudged the charcoal into a shadow that wasn't in the photo. She rubbed it out with her thumb, watched the gray lift and smear. There was a rhythm in her head like waiting for a dial tone. She didn't hear her name until the third time. Mia? The instructor's voice soft around the edges, as if asking didn't matter. Are you okay? Yeah, she said, and made it look like she meant the drawing. Her phone shivered again, unknown. It stopped before she could ignore it twice. Her chest unclenched without permission. She hated that too. By the sink, somebody whispered, Pittsburgh, like a prayer with no theology under it. The model's breath rasped. The charcoal squeak in her own hand sounded like someone dialing an old rotary phone in a dream. In the sit room, the table had been extended and the chairs filled in without drama. Monitors on the wall ran the same loop everyone else was watching, but with different fonts on the overlays, different phone numbers in corners for calling people who could do things. The president slid a folder aside, hands flat on wood. Give me what's true, she said. The Homeland Security Advisor summarized in tight sentences, Pittsburgh blast, Chicago blast, coordination unknown, devices likely, timing close enough to be a message. The FBI director did the crime scene dance in 7 verbs. ATF spoke blast patterns. The DNI said the quiet part quickly. No chatter, no claim that tracked, a curious unison of silence. The Secretary of Defense said posture and ready, and no indication of additional threat vectors overseas, which meant we haven't seen this before in a nicer suit. And phones? The President asked, cutting through. The DHS Undersecretary looked down at her notes. There are preliminary reports of spikes in silent unknown calls proximate to the events, she said. We are working with carriers to verify. It could be noise. It could be that people answer their phones when the world is on fire. Or, the President said, or someone is using the network to feel for us, the Undersecretary said. She did not say to aim. A man at the far end of the table, entitled Strip Our Names on Days Like This, said, if this escalates, we consider emergency authorities. We could geofence affected areas, shut off towers if we had to. Shut off the country's phones, the Chief of Staff said, with the tone that made a statement a question. Nowhere near that, the Undersecretary said, and meant not yet. The President looked at the Pittsburgh loop as if the pixels owed her an answer. Find me who, she said quietly. Find me how. Reduce the harm. Do not talk yourselves into magic. Heads nodded. Someone wrote the sentence down, like that made it a program. At 08:43 Eastern, a spreadsheet that had never wanted to matter started mattering. Lucas watched the call anomalies line go from orange to red in a swath of the Midwest that had no camera pointed at it. He drew an imaginary circle and the map obliged him. 10-mile radius, call spikes on unknown, short duration, no audio, and new, multiple repeats to the same end users in a 5-minute slice. Where? Patel asked, not looking up from a call sheet that had been cut and pasted since Obevorillo. St. Louis Metro, Lucas said. East Side. Before your phone asks why I'm jumping at shadows, look at the cadence. 2 rings, twice, 3 numbers hit, twice each within 90 seconds. Could be a PBX throwing up, someone offered. The room always offered. Lucas shook his head. PBX hiccups don't respect map edges, these do. The cluster is too clean. Get local on the bridge, Patel said. Call the Fusion Center, ask for PD, send the please don't think I'm crazy version. They did. A harried lieutenant came on, and Lucas said the part that made you sound like the boy who cried wolf when you didn't bring teeth. If your 911 is flooded with unknown calls or your people report phones ringing with silence, note addresses. Don't panic the public. Just take notes. The lieutenant had the look of a man who had practiced not being impressed by DC. He nodded anyway. Copy. We'll push an internal note. Across the room, Sarah's square lit from the hallway outside the director's office. She had that lean in her shoulders that meant, I'm 2 steps ahead, and I need your feet. If we get a third, she said without preamble, we name the pattern out loud. Soon as we earn it, Lucas said. Then earn it, she said. The next unknown of the morning found Agnes Brewer at her kitchen table with a newspaper she had unfolded and not read. The rain had stopped. Gray light made the linoleum considerate. She let the first ring go because she had learned that sometimes the world simply needed to practice wanting your attention. She picked up on the second because she had also learned that waiting for the third ring was how you lost people. "Hello," she said, because politeness was not a debt. It was an inheritance. A silence with weight moved down the line. "We do not do this," she said, kind but crisp. "If this is a sales call, tell your supervisor I don't answer unknown numbers. If this is a prank, go learn an instrument." No answer. "You have the wrong house," she said, and placed the handset back in its cradle, a motion so old it felt ceremonial. She looked at the photograph on the fridge, a boy with a cowlick taller than his hair. Henry at 11, the year he had insisted on sleeping with his boots on because cowboys, it turned out, needed to be ready. "Stop it," she told the past, the way people tell cats to leave counters. She poured herself more tea. 3 minutes later and 900 miles away, a car alarm on a quiet block in St. Louis woke a dog, which woke a man, who swore and went to the window in time to see a pressure wave translate itself into breaking glass. Mia used the first 15 minutes after class to pretend that she had a life that wasn't shaped by empty lines. She washed her hands. She wiped charcoal off a mirror that had forgotten to be a mirror. She put her phone in her back pocket and the world in her front one and walked into rain that had decided to be a mist. The notifications were a stack. She thumbed without reading. A friend's group thread trying humor, an old professor asking if she still did computers, with a link to the news no one could stop linking. A number she didn't recognize with a single sentence. "Are you safe?" The name attached to it was older than she let herself think about. She didn't reply. She put the phone back and felt it buzz again, angry now, insistence in haptic form. Unknown. She stopped under the awning of the printing shop and watched the screen like it might confess. She almost answered. She didn't. It stopped. A siren threaded the air. She realized she was shaking and put it away as if pockets could discipline nerves. She crossed to the cafe that burned beans on purpose and ordered the dark roast on purpose and sat at the small table by the window because she liked the way glass softened the world into something you could draw. On the TV in the corner, they had turned the sound off and put captions on. "Officials caution against misinformation," they wrote, and "seeking witnesses." And phones ringing, report, unusual calls to... She left the cup on the table, untouched. She walked back outside to the sound of a train dragging itself somewhere. Her phone buzzed. A text, not unknown this time. "I know who you are. We need you." No signature, no context. An attached photo of a badge on a lanyard, blurred on purpose. The message followed like an apology. "Agent Sarah Rhee, your number came through a friend who owes me a favor. Call when you can do it without hating me." Mia laughed once in a way that wasn't laughter. She typed wrong number and didn't send it. She typed "I don't do that anymore" and didn't send that either. Finally, she typed coffee first and erased it and typed nothing and put the phone back and let the future find another door. She had tried very hard to have a smaller life. The world was very bad at letting people keep those. By midday, the maps had more circles on them and the circles had more notes. The press had settled on phrases they could say fast. The first press conference had the mayor in front of microphones that held like weapons. The second had the police superintendent saying sentences that had not slept. The president spoke at 13:01 ET, grim through the teleprompter, words about resilience and justice that stuck because they had to. She did not say terror. She did not say cell towers. Her mouth made investigation into a promise. Lucas spent 40 minutes with carrier engineers and a whiteboard full of acronyms that felt like a pry bar. IMSS, SAP, SS7, stir shaken, and came away with the same unease, tidier. The unknowns weren't spoofed in the way people had spoofed since caller ID existed. They were formed deeper, nearer the bone of the network, like something that understood how towers got lonely at midnight. He reported it up. He marked a line in the ops log that would later look like foreshadowing if anyone survived to narrate. He swallowed a yawn and lied to his body about adrenaline. Sarah sent him a dot on a map. Me. It pulsed on a street he knew near a bar they had once pretended not to need. Off the bridge for an hour. "I have a conversation to start." He sent back a thumbs up and a sentence that meant, "Be careful," and read as good hunting. On cue, his phone vibrated, unknown. He watched it ring out, the way you watch a fuse burn. He let it. Somewhere, someone answered theirs. The third blast came at 1321 Central, on a street in St. Louis lined with brick and small trees, and a bakery with a case that made mornings into something else. It blew out windows and sent a litter of glass across a display of croissants with an almost tender force. It hurt mostly ears and pride and afternoon plans. It killed 2 people who were not in the news later because the night swallowed names. The numbers at the bottom of the screen changed again. The country moved in the way countries do, toward or away from something nameless. Back in the ops floor, someone said it out loud because not saying it had become the luxury they didn't have. "It's the phones," they said. "No," Lucas said reflexively, "because the universe hates people who decide too soon." Then, maybe, on his screen, the anomaly map for St. Louis jittered into verifiable. The lieutenant on the bridge came back with a handful of addresses and 3 complaints from his patrol officers about weird calls and ring and nobody and twice in a row like a dog wanting in. Lucas stared at the timestamp, at the way a 5-minute window of silence glowed brighter than the surrounding hours. He had seen a pattern and told himself it was only a draft. Now it had a second line, then a third. He wrote 2 words on a sticky note with a Sharpie and pressed it to the edge of his monitor until the ink bled through. Signal. Noise. He looked up at the loop of the street in St. Louis, and for a breath, the whole country looked like a circuit board, and the empty calls looked like fingers. Thank you for listening to the AI Sanctuary Files. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss Book 3. Watch Book 1. Do not answer to catch up if this is your first time listening.